I still remember the scent of lavender from the laundry detergent that morning. How normal everything felt. Birds chirping outside the kitchen window, my son's backpack resting by the front door, the quiet hum of the washing machine. Life felt ordinary. Stable.
Ours.
Then my husband walked in and shattered it all with a single sentence. I put the house on the market today. At first, I thought I misheard him. I paused mid-fold, my hands buried in a pile of towels, and turned to look at him. He didn't even glance at me, just stood there in his gray button-down, thumbing through emails on his phone like he had announced something as minor as picking up milk from the store. "What did you say?" I asked, heart racing. Mark finally looked up and repeated himself, casually, coldly. "I'm selling the house. Already listed it this morning." Let me back up for a moment. My name is Vanessa Green, and that house? It wasn't just a house to me. It was my grandmother's home, the place I spent every summer growing up, baking pecan pies, helping her hang laundry in the backyard, watching storms from the front porch swing. When she passed away 7 years ago, she left it to me in her will. It was the one thing in this world that ever truly felt like mine. Mark and I had been married for 12 years. Like any couple, we had our share of highs and lows. But I never imagined he'd drop a bomb like this without so much as a conversation. "You can't just decide that without talking to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as panic bloomed in my chest. He leaned against the counter, casually sipping his coffee. "You're overreacting. I've been thinking about this for months. The market's hot. We'll make a good profit. It's the smart move."
We.
I asked, stunned. "You mean you?" Because I never agreed to this. That's when he delivered the punch I didn't see coming. "You transferred the deed to me, remember? When we refinanced 4 years ago. For the lower rate." The air left my lungs.
Yes, I had.
We were struggling financially then, and Mark said his credit score would get us better terms. I signed the papers out of trust, love, and ignorance. I didn't think twice. I never imagined he'd use it against me. "You're selling my grandmother's house without even telling me?" He shrugged. "Legally, it's not yours anymore. It's just property, Vanessa. We'll get something nicer, more modern." But it wasn't just property. It was where our son took his first steps in the hallway. Where I planted rose bushes after my miscarriage to remind myself life could still grow after loss. Where I spent years making a home while he worked late, traveled, climbed corporate ladders, and slowly drifted into someone I barely recognized. I stood there, trembling, towel still clutched in my hand. "Why are you really doing this?" He sighed, like I was being difficult. "Because I'm tired of this place. It's outdated. And frankly, I need space. I'm suffocating here. With you." There it was. The truth he'd been dancing around for years. I didn't say anything.
Couldn't.
My mouth was dry, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. He left the room without another word, as if he'd just checked a box off his to-do list. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed long after he'd fallen asleep, staring at the wall, replaying his words. Was this the end? Had he always seen me as disposable, just like the house? The next morning, it got worse. At Jacob's school fundraiser, Mark made sure to loudly tell a group of parents, "We're downsizing. Vanessa doesn't really bring an income, so we're making adjustments." I felt my cheeks burn. The other moms looked at me with a mix of pity and awkward discomfort. No one knew I had quit my job in publishing to be a full-time mom, that I ran the household, managed the bills, made sure Mark's clothes were pressed, his appointments made, our son fed and loved. I wasn't just unpaid. I was unseen. When we got home, I confronted him. "You embarrass me today. Why are you doing this?" His eyes narrowed. "You embarrassed yourself. Maybe if you contributed more, I'd treat you differently." There it was again, that subtle blade he'd been twisting for years. Every time I asked for support, I was told I was too emotional. Every disagreement turned into my fault. When he withheld affection, he said it was because I was too clingy. When I voiced concern, he called it nagging. I didn't see it at the time. But now, in that moment, it all clicked. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the final act in a play that had been running quietly for years. One-eyed unknowingly been cast in as the victim. But what Mark didn't know was this. I might have been quiet before, but I was listening now, and I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I stopped going to sleep with the same sense of peace after that morning. You know how some moments split your life into before and after? That was mine. Mark's announcement about selling our home kept replaying in my head like a song I didn't want to hear. Only now, every interaction between us was laced with something darker, coldness, contempt, and a kind of invisible cruelty that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. But somehow his silence hurt more than if he had. We barely spoke at home, and when we did, it was transactional. The realtor's coming Friday. Don't get in the way. Jacob has a dentist appointment. I'll be late. Can you please not burn dinner tonight? That last one, said with a smirk while scrolling through his phone, nearly broke me. At that point, I should have left. I knew it deep down. But when you've built your entire adult life around someone, even their abuse starts to feel like your own failure. Besides, where would I go? The house was legally his now. And I hadn't worked in over 7 years. I had nothing to fall back on, no income, no backup plan, no family nearby. Just Jacob. And the aching need to keep something normal for him. Then came the night of the school fundraiser. I had dressed in a navy blue blouse and jeans that I still hoped flattered my shape. I curled my hair and put on light makeup, trying to look presentable, even though I felt like I was unraveling inside. At the event, while Jacob ran off to play with his friends, I stood with a few moms from the PDA, chatting about bake sales and Teacher Appreciation Week. Then Mark showed up, all charm and cologne. He joined the group mid-conversation and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're selling our house soon. Gotta downsize now that Vanessa's staying home full-time, or should I say, forever." Laughter. Nervous, awkward. One mom gave me a sympathetic glance and changed the subject. Another turned away. I smiled, politely, because what else could I do? Break down in front of the lemonade stand? That night, I cried in the shower with the water running hot over my face, so Jacob wouldn't hear. I pressed my palm to the tile and thought, this can't be my life. This can't be how I disappear. A few days later, I found the folder. It was in a cardboard box in the attic, one Mark probably assumed I'd never go through. I had gone up there looking for Jacob's old toys to donate, trying to distract myself from everything. But when I opened the folder and saw the real estate contracts, something told me to keep reading. That's when I found the name, scribbled in the margins of a printed floor plan for a sleek downtown condo. Sabrina prefers modern fixtures. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. Sabrina. It wasn't just a name. It was confirmation. Mark wasn't selling our home to simplify our lives. He was making room for someone else in his. My stomach twisted. Suddenly, the late nights at work made sense. The cologne that wasn't his usual brand. The text he once tried to hide that said, "She's too distracted to notice anything." I was the she. I couldn't scream. I couldn't throw things. All I could do was sit there, knees pressed to my chest on the dusty attic floor, while the walls of my life caved in. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay next to him in bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. I wondered how long he'd been planning this. How long he'd looked me in the eyes and lied. I didn't cry this time. I thought about Jacob, about the rose bushes in the backyard, about the life I'd buried beneath laundry piles, grocery runs, and sacrifice. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The next morning, I called my cousin Trish, a family law attorney in Boston I hadn't spoken to in a while. "Hey," I said, voice trembling. "I need help. And I need you to be discreet." Trish didn't ask questions. She just said, "Say no more. I'm here." Over the next few weeks, I began gathering evidence. Bank statements showing withdrawals and transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Text messages I pulled from our family tablet, which Mark forgot to unlink from his phone. Emails from a joint account where he'd communicated with the realtor about finalizing the sale. Every piece of proof was a thread unraveling the web of deceit he'd spun around me. But I still kept quiet, acted normal, packed Jacob's lunch, smiled during dinner, played the part. Because if Mark wanted a performance, I was going to give him the final act he'd never forget. When you've been quiet for so long, people mistake you for weak. They don't see the wheels turning in your head. They don't see you memorizing passwords, noting patterns, checking the timestamps on text messages he thinks you'll never read. But I was watching. Every little move Mark made was fuel. And I wasn't going to burn quietly anymore. By the third week after the fundraiser, the house had a coming soon sign staked into our front yard. The photographer had come by to take listing photos while I pretended to be out. I was in the laundry room, hiding, fighting the urge to scream as he snapped pictures of the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of dinners, the hallway where Jacob took his first steps, the master bedroom where Mark once promised, "We'll grow old together in this house." But I was done mourning. I was done playing the dutiful wife. I was preparing for battle. Trish, my cousin and secret weapon, had reviewed everything I sent her. The financial transfers, the flirtatious emails, even a few late-night photos of Mark and Sabrina dining at a swanky downtown spot that someone on Facebook had unknowingly tagged them in. But the real turning point came when Trish said, "You said this was your grandmother's house?"
Yeah.
She left it to me. "And you refinanced it in Mark's name?" I sighed. "To get a better rate. I was told it was the only way." She clicked her tongue. "Did you ever actually change the trust clause from your grandmother's will?" I paused. "I don't know. I assumed. Vanessa, that might be the game changer. If her will had a legacy protection clause, and Mark is selling the house in bad faith, meaning for his own profit or personal benefit, like shacking up with Sabrina, that sale might be legally reversible. Or, at the very least, stoppable." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks. Trish pulled some strings. Contacted the law firm that had managed my grandmother's estate. They still had a copy of the original will. And buried in it, right there in black and white, was a clause. "This home is to remain in the family and shall not be sold or transferred outside of direct lineage without mutual agreement or intent to preserve the home's legacy." Mark hadn't just been heartless. He was breaching a legal agreement. And he had no idea. The next morning, while he was on his morning jog, pretending to be a health-conscious guy while probably texting Sabrina, I met with a local family court judge and filed an emergency injunction to block the sale. We had the paperwork, the will, and screenshots of messages from Mark discussing his move-in plans with Sabrina. He even mentioned the words "finally done with Vanessa" and "condo has a rooftop tub." Yes, a rooftop tub was apparently worth destroying a 12-year marriage for. The court granted the injunction within hours. By the time Mark got home, sweaty and smug, the listing had been pulled. The realtor had called him in a panic. And I was waiting on the porch for the first time in months, calm, collected, and holding a copy of the court order. "What the hell is this?" he barked, flipping through the papers. "An injunction. The house isn't being sold. You can't do this. You signed it over to me." I nodded. "And you tried to sell it for your girlfriend, which, turns out, violates the will. My name might not be on the deed, but it's still protected. This house isn't just property, it's family legacy." He went pale. "You don't even work," he muttered, the same line he always reached for when cornered. "Funny," I replied. "I managed to do more in 3 weeks of staying quiet than you did with your entire career." He opened his mouth, but I wasn't finished. "I've already filed for divorce. I've got everything, your texts, bank transfers, even the rooftop tub nonsense. You're going to walk away with nothing, Mark. And when I'm done, Sabrina's going to realize she signed up for a broke, bitter man with a ruined credit score and no house to offer." He turned to storm inside, but I added one more thing. "Oh, and you'll need to find a new place to sleep. The house is mine again. Legally. Permanently. I've already started the paperwork to have your name removed from the deed." That night, he stayed at a hotel. The next week, he moved into a friend's spare room. By the end of the month, the house was solely mine again. It was the beginning of something new. Not just freedom, but power. The quiet, unstoppable kind that grows in a woman when she finally realizes she was never the weak one. The first morning after Mark officially moved out, I walked barefoot through the kitchen, holding a hot cup of coffee like it was a trophy. The house was quiet, finally quiet. No passive-aggressive sighs, no doors slamming, no cold silence at the breakfast table. Just me, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and a beam of sunlight stretching across the floor like a promise. It felt like I could breathe again. I changed the locks that afternoon. It wasn't about keeping him out, not really. It was about reclaiming space. Every lock, every drawer reorganized, every photo taken down or put up, it was a slow unraveling of his presence and a rebuilding of myself. Jacob came home from school and noticed the difference immediately. "Did you move the couch?" he asked, confused by the shift. "I did." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "We're starting fresh." He didn't ask much about his dad. Just enough. Kids know more than we give them credit for. But I reassured him that love still filled this house, and that we weren't going anywhere. What Mark had underestimated, like so many men do, was just how much women remember. How much we hold inside. How we survive by instinct, but thrive by choice. After filing for divorce, I discovered more than just peace. I found out Mark had open credit cards in my name. Tried to funnel money into a new shared account with Sabrina. He wasn't just careless, he was calculated. But that worked in my favor. With the help of Trish and a determined family court lawyer named Janice, a godsend in pumps, we compiled a case that was airtight. I kept my house. I was awarded primary custody of Jacob. And Mark? He was left with a hefty alimony bill and court-mandated debt repayment for the identity fraud. Turns out, rooftop bathtubs don't come cheap when you're legally broke. Oh, and Sabrina? She was gone by the time the ink on the divorce was dry. Last I heard, she blocked him on everything after realizing fresh start really meant baggage and a financial mess. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy that part. But the real revenge? It wasn't the money. It wasn't the win in court. It was becoming the woman he never believed I could be. I took online courses, updated my resume, got a part-time editorial job at a local publisher. It didn't pay like Mark's corporate gig, but it was mine. I even started writing essays about legacy, love, and losing yourself in someone else's story. One of them got picked up in a regional magazine. The title? I gave him a house. He gave me a war. I came out owning both. That one hit. I painted the living room walls light sage green, pulled up the carpets, and found hardwood underneath, my grandmother's original floors. I spent weekends sanding and sealing, sometimes with Jacob dancing around me in socks, sliding across the newly polished planks. That house had been silent too long. It was finally alive again. The best moment came 6 months later. Jacob and I hosted a small backyard dinner with close friends. String lights overhead, paper lanterns swaying in the breeze, laughter echoing across the porch. At one point, Jacob stood on a chair and made a toast, awkward and sweet, the way only an 11-year-old can. To Mom, for making the house feel like a home again. I cried, right there at the table. No shame this time, because healing isn't a perfect process. Some days I still walk into a room and expect Mark's cologne. I still flinch when I hear certain phrases. But now I know what that ache is, not weakness but memory. A scar, not an open wound. And I carry it with pride. So if you're reading this, wondering whether you'll survive the wreckage someone left you in, you will. But don't just survive.
Reclaim.
Reclaim your voice. Reclaim your legacy. Reclaim every corner they tried to take from you. Because your name on the mailbox? Your hands on the walls? Your strength rising from the very ground they tried to rip away? That's your story now. And they don't get to write the ending. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.